Welcome back to Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. Now, for the first time in Kenya's history, we have unprecedented numbers of political aspirants seeking elective office as independents. Compare that to the 3 independents we have in this current parliament. Speak to any of those potential independents and they'll tell you the same thing. Their votes were stolen, they were rigged out, and they blame the party machinery. Well, today's guests are part of that machinery. Oduor Ongwen, Executive Director of ODM, who's now joined us, thank you, and Andrew Musangi, Chairman of the Jubilee Party National Election Board. So Oduor, thank you for coming. You recently felt the wrath of one of those aspirants who claimed that the party was trying to rig her out. Describe your experience.
I think the experience was a normal hit people experience, political parties experience when we are approaching elections. It happens that in this country, elections are like a life and death situation. It is such a zero-sum game that people go to ridiculous extents to be able to win positions or defend positions. So it was not something out of ordinary. But having said that, I think this country needs to rethink its approach to politics. I think politics should be about a democratic process, not about money, not about gangsterism, not about fraud. But what we have seen in the last 1 month is basically madness.
Madness. So how would you grade yourself, therefore, on the nominations that ODM conducted, which are incidentally still underway because Suba is voting?
Looking at the history of ODM, this is the 3rd primaries ODM is conducting. We had the fiasco of 2007. Then the party thought it would improve the process in 2013. If you check 2013 and 2007, there was an incremental improvement. However,
of how much?
I can't put figures to it, but checking in that 2007, basically there was nothing that happened. In 2007, in most parts, nomination happened. However, in some parts, particularly Nyanza, the incumbents basically conspired and no nominations happened in that place.
How is that?
Now, looking at 2017, you will see we changed tack. Number 1, we tried to stagger the nominations. 2, we zoned the country such that competitive primaries were only in those areas where the competition is necessary. But still, if you look at 2017, almost everywhere, including Nairobi, where we normally have running battles, during the voting, everything was peaceful, everything was organized. However, hell broke loose at the time of announcement of results, where you find in some cases now the returning officers being kidnapped. You find some of them people compromising in whatever manner. Others are being intimidated. We have even affidavits of returning officers who are saying that they were made to announce results at gunpoint. Then later you find even returning officers having announced a set of results. By the time they are making returns to the National Elections Board, a completely different set of results. So what that tells us is that for us to have successful primaries, we need first of all fidelity on the part of the election management boards of our parties, but also the aspirants and the supporters, because it cannot be left to one institution. Now, just to finish, but I think, and I think this is a debate that should start now, not when we are approaching next primaries. Do parties have to attempt to do a general election in name of primaries? It's only in Kenya where you have parties political parties that do not have the capacity to do a general election, attempting to do a general election.
Okay, so we'll come to that, but I'll ask you a question, because Andrew earlier told us that he'd give himself an 8 out of 10 for the nominations that the Jubilee Party conducted. What grade would you give yourself?
Andrew was able to grade himself because he's heading the elections board. I do not manage elections or primaries.
You're the executive director.
Yes, so I only provide the logistics and the infrastructure.
So I'll go to the
so I won't want to grade myself.
I'll go to the panelists, because Odwar has joined us. He's described what happened on his front. Andrew has given us their experience. Odwar has been roughed up. He's talked about returning officers being kidnapped. He's talked about discrepancies in the announcement of nomination results. What grade would you give ODM for the nominations that they conducted?
I think I'll give them 4 out of 10.
4?
4.
I seem to agree with Mutegi.
4. Why is that?
Because even the way you're trying to explain from 2007 up to today, the 2017 primaries were horrible. Up to now, they're still haggling with it.
Do you agree with the 8 that?
No, even them, I'll give him less than 8. I think I'll give him 6.
6.
Yeah.
I would give Jubilee 7.
7.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because of the manner they were able to handle the crisis, they were able to communicate, they were able to...
They recovered well.
They recovered, they learned their lessons. You see, unlike ODM, who in this case I will give 4, there was communication from everywhere, so you even get confused. One moment it's Pareno, the next moment it's Etale, the next moment is Oduorongwen, the next moment is Agnes Zani. So it's even hard to know who exactly is the right returning officer for which region.
So ODM, therefore, as a more experienced party, a longer history, 3rd nomination, should have done much better.
And having started earlier anyway, because they started theirs, and like Jubilee, who did it, thought they could do it in one day. But the ODM had a lot of time. But I think ODM, the major problem they had, and I think I would like to hear his comment, is about not even that category, it's about corruption. Corruption in the primaries.
Incidentally, ODM wanted to go for the nominations long before the legally acceptable time by IEBC. IEBC had to rein in and tell them, look here guys, it's got to be 13th of April, you have to wait for 13th. They said, but we are ready, we want to go now. So we really thought they were ready, and they were
and actually that was part of the problem, because we had staggered these primaries for 1 month. That meant less counties at a time. When the IBC said we can't do that, it completely complicates the logistics, because now instead of doing 3 counties, you have to do 5 or 6. With that, you have to order new ballot boxes, you have to get into certain logistics, that because we would have had one set of officials moving from one set of counties to another. So even in terms of training of the officials, once you have your program, then somebody who is not part of that planning tells you, no, you can't do it this way, you must do it the other way. It completely destabilizes your plans.
Andrew, you were nodding.
Yes.
I was nodding because that's one of the rare events where you'll see us having a consensus even as political parties. One of the lessons that I think we will have to take out of this, and this is where I was nodding and agreeing with Oduor, is the ability of parties to compress nominations into a very tight timeline is one thing that we must all accept, given the resources political parties have, is impossible. If, for example, we had, say as ODM requested, they had been allowed to say start in February, what would have happened is you then focus on one county, then the next, and that may have worked better for political parties, even from a budgetary point of view. Now, to say do it between 6th or 5th and 21st meant that, for example, if you take ballot boxes to Kwale, you cannot pack the same lot of ballot boxes and papers and human resources and take them to Kisumu the next day. So it makes that an impossible exercise. When you have a bit more spacing, you can deploy, decommission, redeploy. And that allows you to stretch the same resources and reuse them in an economical manner. Now, when we looked at these timelines, please note, a lot of them are administrative timelines, which then are trying to comply with the statutory timelines. But there was nothing to stop political parties from being able to start earlier, if they so wished, and then allow them to get through the nomination process over a wider bandwidth of time. So that is where I would say I have a measure of sympathy with the views being expressed by Odor.
Incidentally, like Dr. Ongwen says, for ODM primaries, this time, unlike 2013 and 2007, during the voting, there was no chaos, completely. Chaos started during the announcement of results. And Richard,
isn't that a low bar though for ODM? You know, that we say, you know, because you've been so chaotic in the past, the fact that you waited to be chaotic at the announcements is, you know, a measure of progress. Why have the chaos in the first place?
Good question. I think he mentioned it. Gangsterism, money, vested interests.
And I'll come back to you on that, but I think you were posing a question to Andrew.
Yeah, I wanted Andrew, before you came, Andrew told us about obligations, party leadership obligations. We never saw the party leader of ODM come out and talk, roll up his sleeves and get into these murky waters and try to bring sanity. Why?
I think that was very deliberate. We have a constitution which is very clear on who plays what role. And the National Elections Board is the body charged with the management of party elections and party nominations. In the past, our party leader has been accused, rightly or wrongly, of interfering in nomination process. And I think for the last over 1 year, he has been saying, I will not get involved. I will leave the party organs to conduct free, fair and democratic primaries. And he kept to his word, to the extent that even when there was controversy about his brother having lost and again having won under controversial circumstances, he kept off. You could see that also when his first cousin again was involved, and, yes, and was making a lot of noise, wanting the party to intervene. He said, let the party organs handle it. He advised them, if you have complaint, go to the National Appeals Tribunal. Oburu did not choose the route of the tribunal, Jakoyo chose it, and it went full hearing. So he decided this time round, I want to let party organs do their work. I want wananchi to do their bit, and that's it. I understand the president had to intervene in Jubilee once, but that is the first time Jubilee was conducting this, and I think for a president the image was very important to him. But our party leader, having made those promises, if he intervened, it was going to say, once again Raila is interfering. So it's a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Okay, let's give them the opportunity to respond to our viewers because they're specific questions. My name is, no, this is just an example, but I'll read it anyway. My name is Jared, MCA Kimumu Ward in Uasin Gishu County, a KANU ticket. In fact, it never did nominations in Uasin Gishu. It handpicked people and gave certificates. We've been in Nairobi complaining for 2 weeks now, no answer. Ask Bonham Sangi what transpired in Korea West during the nomination. We want to hear from him directly and on live television. Concerned residents. I'm not sure what they're referring to here because they don't give us the context. If you're listening, please tell us what it is you're referring to.
He's also asking about KANU.
No, that was Jared in Kimomo, Uasin Gishu. But there's a separate query about Korea. How can nominations be conducted as a family affair in Isibania Ward? One aspiring candidate had his son, brother, and other family members as presiding officers and clerks. Is that democracy in Jubilee? The primaries messes as a result of biased favorism and top leadership giving in to individuals who are perceived to fund these political parties to a great extent. Hence, differences arise between people's choice and the leader's choice, causing the nomination mess. And then for you, kindly ask Gwen to tell us about the nominations for Nyatike. Those who won are yet to be made public, and certificates have not yet been issued, and that's Kefers in Nyatike. Shall we start with you and then work our way back to Andrew?
Yeah, as I said, there are institutions that deal with this, but I'm privy to what happened in Nyatike. In Nyatike, they did their primaries fairly peacefully, but I understand from the reports we get that when counting was underway, there was disruption. And when there was disruption, I think the returning officer took cover. Later, I understand he filed some reports mentioning a winner. People of Nyatike did not agree with his announcement, and we have 3 people all claiming to have won. So I remember the first time the chair of the National Elections Board named a winner. He was challenged. She was challenged. She withdrew. Now announced another again. Was advised that that was not the situation because these things had been disrupted. So where the returning officer was getting these reports, we don't know. But after that, the contestants went to started the appeal process. They went to the National Appeals Tribunal of ODM. Thereafter, they went to the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal, and I think a decision was supposed to be made yesterday. I haven't yet got a copy of the decision, but I'm sure we will respect the wisdom of that tribunal.
Okay.
Sangia has told us that Jubilee.
Sorry, let's give him an opportunity
to answer
to respond to the questions that the viewers asked. And there's another one. Ask the Jubilee official why returning officers, presiding officers, haven't been paid. That's coming from several people.
Okay. Let me start with the structure of voting, which will address the issue of presiding officers. Say somebody claiming a PO is a relative. I'll give live cases because it might give you a hint as to the size of the exercise. Nakuru. Now, my home county, 900 polling stations. You need 900 presiding officers. You need 2,100 clerks, because there are 3 clerks for every polling station and 1 presiding officer.
So that makes it 2,700 actually.
Exactly. You are bound to have somebody who might be related to somebody, and even more so in Korea, because remember, you're choosing these people from amongst the local people of that area. Nobody has the logistical or financial capacity to transport presiding officers to Korea. So here's what we told candidates. We said, even if you find one MCA's cousin's brother's uncle's sister is the presiding officer, it matters not, because what you should do is you have agents for every single polling station. Secondly, the counting takes place at that very polling station in the presence of your agents. So in the morning you open the polling station. As the balloting materials are being unsealed, your agents are there. Throughout the day, your agents are present while people vote. Throughout the evening, while votes are counted, your agents are there. After counting, your agents sign the tallying forms. And this time, we went even further. We asked candidates, please tell your agents to photograph the tallying sheet, the Form 3, as soon as the exercise is over, so that as you leave that polling station and you take them to the constituency tallying center, there can be no alterations at all. Now, this is what saved people like Njagwa in Starehe. They just produced the photographs. And when you compare the photographic images from 4 candidates and they tally, and then you can see an alteration on the form, you immediately solve the problem of a relative or a corrupt person or any other misdemeanors or election offenses being conducted at that location. Right? Now, if this candidate says in Korea West he met somebody's cousin, You can imagine, or brother, you can imagine at headquarters, we have no way of knowing who's related to who. We receive applications online. There's an entire department handling HR alone and saying we hire. We delegated this to county election boards. Every county has an election board. And we said, you conduct the selection, don't centralize it in Nairobi, because we have no capacity for that. So every county had a board of 9 members handling selection of presiding officers, returning officers, etc. And what comes back to us, we said we will accept, because at the end of the day, somebody has to count the votes. Now, even if I'm your sister or your brother, if you're watching me with your agents, I should have no capacity or ability to change what is on the tallying form without being caught out. So that's to answer that candidate. Oh, sorry, that voter.
Yes.
The second issue relating to our payments of presiding officers and returning officers. We conducted nominations over 21,000 polling stations. Now, admittedly, we've had a lot of difficulty reconciling information because the payment platform we're using is an M-Pesa-based system where we're forwarding money to POs and ROs who served the party. All I can ask them for is patience at this point. Yesterday, the audit of payments, and by the way, this is an independent function also from the National Elections Board, it's being handled purely by the Finance Department. We have all manner of claims for reimbursement which are now being audited. As at yesterday afternoon, we had paid 41,000 officers who served the party. There's still another 18,500 to be paid. You can imagine the scale of this exercise, and this goes back to what Daktari said. When you look at a political party and say, do you have capacity to run nominations? This is among the post-mortem issues we'll be addressing. I speak to presiding officers every day. They will tell you. A lot of them have my own number and think it is Musangi handling payments or it's the National Elections Board. But because these people worked and sacrificed for the party, the only assurance I can give them is we've spent a week, paid up to 2/3. We have 1/3 to go. And we're pushing out these payments every day by M-Pesa, every day in bulk. And all I can ask them for at this point is to be patient with the party. They will all be paid, every single one of them. 18,500 to go. If we've done 40,000 over the last 1 week, I expect within another week we shall have finished paying every single person. There's also transporters who moved ballot papers from constituency to polling station and back. There are returning officers who ended up coming back at night, 4 a.m. from various remote parts of the country to come to county tallying centers. There are constituency returning officers who then came back to Nairobi to bring the returns so that the appeals could proceed with the raw data available at head office. All those people will be paid.
I wanted to ask Olu about the thuggery he's described. According to Musangi, Jubilee will take the culprits to court. There was much more of that nonsense in ODM. What are you going to do about that?
The compromised electoral officials.
The people using guns and all the kind of crap.
First of all, we have dealt with the cases of primaries violence in various parts of the country. We have a disciplinary committee of the party as a standing committee, not an ad hoc committee. And over the years, we have referred so many cases to them, and they have been able to pronounce themselves on a number of them, including expulsion of some members. We have had some members fined for their, others have been reprimanded. So we have our disciplinary committee. However, cases of thuggery, those are criminal offenses, and we have law enforcement officers in this country. So as a party, we do not have the mechanism of prosecuting and jailing people who commit crimes. But what amazes me is that I don't know whether people are allowed to commit crimes if they are involved in party activities, because we see police apprehend people who fight in bars, We see police apprehend pickpockets in the streets. But when thuggery happens in a political party, even as the police are watching, it's like when you are engaged in a political enterprise, you are immune to prosecution. I don't think parties and their supporters are above the law.
Listening to you, it sounds as if your values are at odds with the practice of politics, particularly in your party. Is that a fair assessment?
No, not quite. I think we have values that we espouse, and I have just told you what we have done over the years.
The point I'm making is that you are bemoaning the negativity, the thuggery, the gangsterism, the corruption in your party.
Yes.
But you seem to be fighting a losing battle within ODM. Because ODM, when you talk about nominations, is synonymous with chaos. You say that 2013 was better than 2007. You had Men in Black. You were roughed up. We saw you on television.
So bad is the loss that their tribunal, while sitting in our hotel in Nairobi, was attacked by gangsters.
Yeah,
and people filed a report.
And that's exactly what I'm talking about. That we have processes where we would want to rein in our members, but there are things that are outside the province of political parties. Dealing with crime, a crime committed in at Orange House and a crime committed in the street is still a crime.
Yes.
Yes.
And so why is your party unable to staunch the flow of violence emanating from its own members?
That is exactly what we have been trying within our system, but we must be complemented by the justice system in this country. We do not have a law of the jungle in this country. But it happens that
jungle in your party?
Yeah, it happens that when it is a political crime, people leave it that the political parties should solve it.
Dr. I need to understand.
Yeah.
If the ODM party was able to identify some errand members and even expelled, as you say, you took action.
Yes.
Have you people done anything about the Men in Black at Kasarani? That was a party function, and these are people who were clearly seen. The footage was replayed on national television.
I'm happy you are bringing that, and you people, you are in the media. The Nyukuri report is public about Men in Black. These are people who are seen in national television, where the law enforcement officers can be able to, even someone to write a statement, leave alone being apprehended. At least we put a task force, it gave a report, where we acted on the report on our part, but did the law enforcement officers take anything? That day we had 200 policemen at Kasarani.
Did you ask the AIG why he didn't do it?
It is in the report, and I hope all of you have read the report.
Anyway, in the case where you attacked, you find Elizabeth Ongoro $1 million bob, and suppose she doesn't pay. What enforcement do you have?
Yeah, then we go to the next level,
which is,
unfortunately, now she's outside our jurisdiction, because instead of paying, she jumped ship and was welcomed in another political party. And those are the kind of frustrations you.
But you have said that is criminal.
Because if we could have a situation where if Jubilee expels a member because of misconduct, ODM should not be very happy to receive that kind of member. But when you have these kind of situations that Mutegi can cause chaos here and then is welcomed in the next home, then
but isn't that the responsibility of the
did you go to the police? Did you go to the police and get a P3 so that the police now can take action? Because without that, the police would not nothing.
That case is still active at Kilimani police station.
Answer the question. Did you go write a statement?
Yes.
Okay. But the point you're making about parties disciplining errant members, and that one person who is unwelcome in Jubilee should not be welcome in ODM. But even with the aspirants that you have on board, we have seen people within the national news who have been accused of all manner of things. Why do you accept them as aspirants?
Again,
no, hang on, I'll come to you, because I think that was more egregious in Jubilee.
You're saying people who've been accepted as aspirants?
People who've been accepted as aspirants. So if we're talking about the quality of people within the parties, people seeking elective office, why do you have people of questionable integrity?
You see, when it's a difficult question you ask, Uduak, and I'll tell you why. When we look at the laws of our country, one of the things, and I speak now with some authority because this is my field, one of the things you must accept, yes, is one, people are innocent until proven guilty of any offense. Now, one of the requirements was a clearance from the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Authority. The EACC clearances for all our candidates were received. Now, no matter how much the media may have vilified an individual, or there's a public perception that this individual might not be the right person for this or that reason, I can assure you there are very many moral judgments you can pass here, and I can pontificate about it all day long, about my personal views, but that becomes irrelevant when you're talking about process. Secondly, when you talk about issues of errant officials, again, the legal position is the police prosecute when there's a complainant. A complaint must be made. So it is up to the political parties to action the complaint and follow it through. For example, even if I found a returning officer guilty of fraud, the police will never know about it. So if you have filmed men in black, you still take your complaint with your evidence and file it with the police. And this is when you get that level of secondary support where you say, have you prosecuted this guy who assaulted my officers? And I know we have one incident which is still being pursued, I think in Embu or Meru, where a returning officer was assaulted. And that matter is being pursued by the individual returning officer as well as the political party to this hour. And ultimately we intend to see to it that the person responsible is charged.
Talking of vetting and integrity issues and all the rest, in Jubilee, was your body, the elections board, in charge of vetting aspirants? We
were not vetting aspirants as a board ourselves. What would happen is aspirants had a checklist to fulfill, because we wanted to make sure the organs that are vetting them, so example on corruption issues, it's not, I can't sit down and say, I think because I read in the media you might have been involved in this or that. Ask the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Authority, what are your records on this person, and can you write a clearance letter? And they were doing the same for all political parties, because it was necessary. Even if I clear you and you win the nomination in Jubilee, if you go to the IEBC and you don't have the EACC clearance, you'll be knocked out. And what will that mean? We don't have a candidate for that particular seat. So we'll be wasting our time allowing anybody to move forward. The second level of vetting was on other qualifications. You saw that we ended up knocking out a candidate because of suspect academic papers. And that was done because as soon as we were receiving applications, we were also telling members, if you have any reason, you know, why we should not accept this candidate, please write to the party confidentially and we investigate. And once we receive that complaint and you see there's an attached court judgment, this guy had gone through legal process, these documents were questioned, then you say, sorry, we cannot accept you. But we still invite the candidate to come to the party and have a justification hearing, which is what we did. The candidate came for a hearing, we said, no, sorry, we can't accept your papers. The candidate appealed, went to the appeals tribunal, also had a hearing, and the appeals tribunal upheld what the Court of Appeal had said. These documents are suspect. You're knocked out.
A former leader of the Mungiki, Maina Jenga, he came to Jubilee, you refused him. He went to court. I think the court wanted you to accept him, for at least for the nominations. He refused. He went, I mean, I don't know what
somewhere else.
He went somewhere else. Well, is he convicted of any crime?
You see, when the issue of Maina Jenga was dealt with, unfortunately it was before my time. But if you look at what the court said, it is a cop-out in a sense, but I read the court judgment. And when I read the court judgment said exactly what I've just said, that he has not been convicted of any crime. Never. Again, being the perceived or accepted, nationally accepted leader of the Mungiki, you'll find yourselves between a rock and a hard place, because again I speak as a lawyer. So this is not a cop-out in the sense of I take no responsibility. The party took a position. But when you go to court, the court says exactly why are you condemning this gentleman called Minor. And if you ask anybody, they say, oh, it's because of his ties and, you know, what we see in the media. A court will never judge somebody based on media. If Minor Njenga goes to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Authority, he'll get a clearance letter, which
so
he
are
did.
you saying, therefore, Andrew,
yes,
that if Minor Njenga had come to Jubilee when you were in charge,
yes,
you would have let him
I would have been very, very cautious about how you deal with a case of somebody like Minor. And at the end of the day, what you also perceive is sometimes there's political judgments in a political process. And when the party looked at Minor Njenga's case, by the way, when the court order came, everybody said we have no choice but to accept his candidature. It is him who took the decision to go elsewhere. But he had a court order. He was armed with it and waving it at the party. And as a lawyer, I could easily have predicted such a scenario.
Would that have been because of perception? He perceived that because these people didn't want me in the first place, I should never bother. The same perception that now I put to you. People will be asking out there, yes, Jubilee was not comfortable with Minor Njenga. Why was Jubilee okay with Anne Waiguru?
Again, you say that you're judging people based on again perception. But you see, when you've gone through this process once and you've already seen that if you make judgment calls on perception, it will just come back to bite you. At the end of the day, the same story goes. Nobody has ever, forget convicted, nobody has charged Anne Waiguru with any offense. Nobody has even charged her. Forget about anything else. Same with Minor Njenga. You have to be very cautious.
She has only been charged in the public court.
And convicted and hung out to dry. On top of that. But, have you ever seen him in court?
No.
Yeah, but I want to say something about this so-called vetting. I think we completely do not understand what due diligence by a political party is supposed to mean. First of all, people expect us to prosecute people in public and condemn them in the basically playing to the gallery. But when you are talking about vetting by a political party, I think there are a number of things you look at. As Andrew has said, first of all, you look at the qualifications, the record, conduct, and so on, and ask yourself, if we present this candidate to IBC, will he or she be accepted? So you go to various agencies like HELB, like anti-corruption, like credit, yes, credit reference, and so on. Those are legalistic things. But now as a party, and I think that is where most of our supporters, because many people who call themselves members of political parties are basically supporters. Our supporters don't appreciate that parties are supposed to be built on ideology and certain shared values. When a party tries to say, I will look for these values, I would like to look at your past record for, say, the last 2 years and see whether your conduct is consistent with our ideology of social democracy, for example, in ODM. You will get an uproar. People saying, now they want to pick candidates for us. So we must be able to, first of all, educate our members that vetting is not simply about crime. And that brings me to some of the cases you are talking about. You ask yourself, as a political party, what kind of image do we want the public and our supporters to have of us? So that if Udwero Ngwen has been associated with looting public funds, for example, whether he's condemned, whether he has been convicted or not, but that is where now the court of public opinion sometimes counts. And political parties should reserve the right to say that because of our world outlook, these are the kind of people we are looking at. And it should be acceptable for various organs of political parties to say, this is the checklist of our members, whether they are about criminal acts or not. But That is the problem. Actually, it will be the media which will help the public
very quickly
begin paying for our blood.
Yeah, very quickly because we have to take a break.
Yeah.
If that were true, though, would you have given a direct ticket to the governor of Nairobi, Evans Kidero, given the trail of corruption allegations that follow
associated
him?
with him?
Would Jubilee have allowed the senator of Nairobi, Mike Sonko, to contest, to seek a gubernatorial ticket, given the allegations that follow him? Would you have allowed, Waititu in Kiambu, again, to contest for these nominations, given the allegations that follow him? We've seen him on television throwing stones.
Woodwork, let me jump in there, because again, I say it is a very dangerous path to tread. Subjective judgments on people while you sit in a boardroom in Nairobi. If you look at any of the people you have mentioned, just look at their winning margins. When Wanjiku speaks, she speaks. And at the end of the day, I would be the last person to want to be accused because of a subjective judgment, like Dr. Wen talked about, saying we reserve the right. And here we are trying to play God, and at the end of the day, you'd like people to get to the ballot box. And if Wananchi do not approve of you, let them express themselves in the box. At the end of the day, you cannot sit in Nairobi and decide for the people of Kiambu or the people of Kirinyaga.
So does it therefore mean parties are not interested in ideologies and values? They are only interested in numbers?
Parties are not interested in subjective judgments. If any of these people was sitting somewhere convicted of a crime, then you tell them, sorry, this is the issue we have. But when you sit down here and say, you've been mentioned,
and it's a bad image for us.
I'm sorry, mentioning somebody obviously did not convince the people of Nairobi or the people of Kiambu to change their minds. So obviously they read your newspapers and say, we'll take them up to here. But beyond there, we're not interested in your mention.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Cheche. We're live on Citizen TV. We'll be back after this break.